The laughter followed Lenora Voss all the way to the edge of town. It slipped through the closing door of the general store, drifted across the muddy street, and seemed to cling to the back of her worn brown coat as she walked away with her head held high. She did not turn around. She did not give Corinne Vale or the ranch owners gathered near the stove the pleasure of seeing what their words had done. She simply kept walking, one heavy step after another, carrying everything she owned in an old leather case whose handle had been repaired twice with string. They had told her that mountain ranches needed workers, not burdens. They had told her that a woman her size would eat more than she could earn. One man had looked slowly over her broad body and asked if she expected a horse to carry her up the mountain. Another had laughed and said the poor animal deserved better. Lenora had smiled, because sometimes a smile was the last wall a person had left. Then she had thanked them for their time and walked into the cold afternoon as though nothing inside her had broken. But something had. After years of being called lazy by people who had never watched her work, foolish by people who had never asked what she knew, and undesirable by people who believed a woman's worth could be measured by the width of her waist, Lenora had reached the end of what pride alone could carry. She was 38 years old, widowed, nearly penniless, and standing in a settlement where everyone seemed to have decided what kind of woman she was before hearing her speak. She had come looking for honest work. Instead, she had become the afternoon's entertainment. What none of them knew was that before winter ended, the same woman they laughed out of town would stand before a crowded courtroom holding the papers that could ruin the most powerful man in the valley. And the quiet cowboy who gave her work when no one else would eventually understand that the lonely house he had called home for years had never truly been a home until she crossed its doorway. The settlement of Bellweather sat in a narrow mountain valley where the buildings seemed to have been dropped between two walls of dark pine. Snow still clung to the highest ridges, even though spring had begun below, and cold wind moved through the streets, carrying the smells of wood smoke, horses, wet earth, and bread from the small bakery near the church. Lenora had arrived that morning after 3 days in a rattling stagecoach. She had slept badly, eaten very little, and spent most of the journey with her hands folded over the old purse that held the last of her money. Her thick, dark hair had begun slipping from its pins by the time she stepped down from the coach. Her black dress had gone shiny at the elbows from years of wear. The hem was carefully mended, her boots were cracked, and the coat she wore had belonged to her husband before he died. It was too large across the shoulders and too narrow across her hips, but it was warm. Warmth had become more important than appearance a long time ago. She had believed Bellweather might be different from the places she had left behind. A man at a boarding house 50 miles south had told her that cattle ranches around the valley were desperate for help. He had said a widow who knew cooking and bookkeeping might find a decent position before sunset. Lenora had allowed herself to believe him. That had been her first mistake. By noon, she had visited 3 ranch offices and 2 homes. At the first place, the owner had looked past her toward the street, as though waiting for the actual applicant to arrive. At the second, a woman had said the kitchen was too small for someone of Lenora's build. At the third, the ranch manager had smiled politely until Lenora mentioned she could also manage accounts. Then, his expression changed. "We need somebody who can move quick," he had said. "I can move when there's work to be done." His eyes had dropped to her body. "I'm sure you believe that." Lenora had stared at him for one quiet second. "I don't believe it, sir. I know it." He had looked embarrassed, but embarrassment was not enough to make him hire her. The worst rejection came at Avery's general store, where 3 ranch owners often gathered near the iron stove after lunch. Lenora had entered because someone told her a cattleman named Morris Tate needed a cook and housekeeper. She found him drinking coffee with 2 other men. Corinne Vale stood nearby in a fitted blue dress, discussing preparations for the spring social. Corinne was around Lenora's age, slim, careful in every movement, and respected because her late father had once owned half the businesses on Bellweather's Main Street. She had the kind of polite voice that could make cruelty sound respectable. Lenora approached Morris Tate and explained why she had come. Tate listened, his eyes moving from her face to her coat and then lower. "You ever worked ranch country?" "I ran a household for 15 years, Lenora said. "I kept accounts for my husband's freight business for 11 of those. I can cook, preserve food, mend, order supplies, keep inventory, negotiate prices, and manage wages." One of the men beside Tate gave a soft whistle. "That's a fine list." "It is also true." Tate scratched his jaw. "Problem is, ranch work ain't sitting behind a desk." "I didn't say it was. You may need to carry sacks, climb stairs, walk from one building to another, sometimes fast." "I understand." Corinne smiled over the rim of her teacup. "Mr. Tate is trying to be kind, Mrs. Voss." Lenora turned toward her. "I didn't ask him to be kind. I asked him for work." The store went quiet. Corinne's smile tightened. "Of course. But there is dignity in understanding one's limitations. I know mine." "Do you?" A young clerk behind the counter suddenly became very interested in arranging jars. Corinne glanced toward Tate and the others. "I only mean that mountain ranches are difficult places. Perhaps Mrs. Voss would be better suited to something less demanding." "Such as?" Corinne hesitated. That hesitation told Lenora everything. "There might be mending," she said at last. "I can do more than mend." "I'm sure you can." One of the ranchers chuckled. Tate rubbed a hand over his mouth, trying to hide his own smile. Then the other man said, "Could always hire her to keep the pantry guarded. Nobody would get around her." The laughter came quickly. Lenora stood still. She had learned years ago that people became uncomfortable when the person they insulted refused to help them laugh. The man cleared his throat. "Just joking." Lenora looked directly at him. "I know." That somehow made him look worse. Corinne set down her cup. "There's no need to make this unpleasant." Lenora almost laughed at that. Instead, she picked up her case. "I haven't made anything unpleasant, Mrs. Vale." She looked at Morris Tate. "Thank you for hearing me." He had enough shame to avoid her eyes. Lenora walked toward the door. Behind her, someone whispered, "She won't make it 2 weeks up here." Another voice answered, 2 days if she has to climb a hill." The laughter started again. Lenora stepped outside. She walked until the store disappeared behind her. She passed the church, the livery, and a line of cottonwoods, just beginning to show pale green buds. The road curved beside a creek swollen with snowmelt. She kept walking, because she could still feel the laughter behind her, even after she could no longer hear it. Only when she reached an abandoned wagon shed beyond the last house did she finally stop. The shed leaned badly toward one side. There was no door, only an opening facing a field of brown grass. Lenora stepped inside, set down her case, and lowered herself onto an overturned crate. For several minutes, she simply sat. Then her hands began to tremble. She pressed them together. "Don't," she whispered. Her eyes burned. "Don't you dare." The first tear fell anyway. She wiped it quickly. Another followed. Soon she was covering her face with both hands, trying desperately to keep silent. It was not only Bellweather. It was every room in which someone had looked at her and decided she was stupid because she was heavy. Every doctor who had answered questions she had not asked, while ignoring the problem she had actually come to discuss. Every woman who had spoken to her slowly, as though size and intelligence could not exist in the same body. Every man who had stared, laughed, whispered, or looked away. It was also hunger, fear, exhaustion. It was the fact that she had $12.40 left. Her husband, Walter, had been dead nearly 3 years. He had not been perfect, but he had been kind, and kindness felt much larger after it disappeared. His freight business had collapsed slowly after his death. A partner had taken advantage of Lenora's grief. Debts appeared that she had never known existed, and by the time she understood what had happened, there was almost nothing left to save. She had sold the house, then the furniture, then her wedding china, then her mother's silver brush. The last thing she sold before leaving the city was Walter's pocket watch. She had cried harder over that watch than over the house. Now she sat in a broken shed and wondered whether the people in the store had been right. Perhaps determination was not enough. Perhaps knowledge did not matter if no one allowed her to use it. Perhaps the world could decide a person's value simply by agreeing loudly enough that she had none. Lenora lowered her hands. Across the field, the mountains rose dark and immense. Somewhere above the settlement, a narrow trail disappeared between the pines. She remembered something the stage driver had told her that morning. "There is one more ranch," he had said. "Kells' place, up North Ridge. Does he hire?" The driver had shrugged. "Adrian Kells doesn't do much of anything involving people, but he's got cattle, land, and more work than one man ought to handle. Why does he live alone?" The driver had gone quiet. Life happened. Lenora stared at the trail. She had already walked farther than she should have. Her feet ached. Her knees hurt. The sensible thing would be to return to town, spend money on one night at the cheapest boarding house, and try somewhere else tomorrow. But somewhere else had become a dangerous phrase. There was always somewhere else until there wasn't. Lenora stood. She wiped her cheeks with the inside of her sleeve. Then she picked up her case. One more, she told herself. The climb to Adrian Kells's ranch was nearly 4 miles. Lenora learned this only after she had already walked 2. The trail rose steadily through pine forest, crossing narrow streams and open patches of rock, where the wind came down from the heights with enough force to make her brace herself. She stopped often. She did not pretend otherwise. Her lungs burned, and sweat gathered beneath her collar, despite the cold. Twice she sat on fallen logs and wondered whether continuing was foolish. Each time, she continued. By late afternoon, the trees opened onto a wide shelf of land overlooking the valley. The ranch stood there. It was not large, but it was solid. A weathered 2-story house faced south, toward the distant settlement. Behind it stood a barn, a smokehouse, a bunkhouse that appeared empty, several sheds, and long stretches of fenced pasture climbing toward the slopes. Cattle moved like dark dots against the hills. Lenora stood at the gate, catching her breath. A man emerged from the barn. He was carrying a saddle. He saw her, stopped, and simply looked. Lenora had expected another judgment. She knew the pattern well enough to recognize the moment when someone's eyes reached her body. Adrian Kells looked, but his face did not change. He was tall, perhaps 42 or 43, with broad shoulders made lean from work. His dark hair needed cutting. A short beard covered his jaw, touched with early gray near the chin. He wore a faded red shirt, heavy work pants, boots scarred from years of use, and an expression that suggested smiling was something he had once known how to do but no longer practiced. He set the saddle on the fence. "You lost?" "No." His gaze moved to her case. "You walked up from Bellweather?" "Yes." "Why?" "I was told you might need help." He looked toward the empty trail behind her. "Who told you that?" "A stage driver. Stage drivers talk too much." "So I've noticed." Something almost moved at the corner of his mouth. Almost. He walked closer. "What kind of help?" "Whatever you need that I can do. That's broad. I can narrow it. Go ahead." Lenora shifted the heavy case from one hand to the other. "I can cook. I can clean. I can preserve vegetables, smoke meat, make bread, mend clothing, keep inventory, manage household purchases, keep business accounts, write correspondence, calculate interest, negotiate with merchants, track cattle records if they're written clearly enough, and recognize when a supplier is charging more than he did the month before." Adrian studied her. "Anything else?" "I make very good apple preserves." That almost smile appeared again. "Important skill." "I've always thought so." He looked at the road, then at her boots. "Town turn you away?" The question struck closer than she expected. Lenora lifted her chin. "Several people decided I wasn't suitable." "For what?" "Apparently everything." Adrian's eyes stayed on her face. "Why?" She could have pretended not to know. She was too tired. "You can see why." He was quiet. Lenora hated the silence. She tightened her grip on the case. "If you don't want to hire me, Mr. Kells, say so. I have enough daylight to get partway back down. You know who I am? I asked. People have opinions. They certainly do. What did they tell you? That you don't like people. Fair. That you live alone. True. That you're difficult. Probably true. That something happened to you years ago and nobody knows exactly what. His expression changed slightly. Lenora regretted the words. I didn't ask for details. Good. I came for work. Adrian looked toward the house. When did you last eat? Lenora's cheeks warmed. This morning. What? Coffee. That isn't food. There was bread. How much bread? She stared at him. Does this affect the employment interview? No. Then I don't see why it matters. It matters because you're pale. I'm tired. You're also hungry. I am not asking for charity. Didn't say you were. Then please don't treat me like a beggar. Adrian's brow lifted. For the first time that day, Lenora saw something in a man's face that was not amusement, pity, disgust, or condescension. Respect. Small, cautious, but real. He picked up her case before she could stop him. Lenora frowned. I can carry that. I know. Then why are you carrying it? Because I'm already walking toward the house. He headed across the yard. After 3 steps, he glanced back. You coming? Lenora followed. The kitchen was warm. A black iron stove stood against one wall. Copper pots hung over a long wooden counter. Everything was reasonably clean but poorly organized. Flour sat in an open sack beside onions. Coffee beans were stored near the stove, where heat would ruin them faster. 3 unpaid invoices were tucked beneath a jar. Lenora noticed all of this before she had fully taken off her coat. Adrian placed bread, cold beef, cheese, and a jar of pickles on the table. Sit. I didn't agree to anything yet. Neither did I. He cut 2 pieces of bread. Lenora watched him. Do you always conduct business while feeding strangers? No. That is reassuring. He placed a plate in front of her. Eat. Lenora almost objected. Her stomach betrayed her with a low sound. Adrian pretended not to hear. That kindness hurt more than if he had smiled. Lenora sat. She ate slowly at first. Then hunger won. Adrian poured coffee and sat across from her. Accounts, he said. Lenora swallowed. What about them? You said you know accounts. I do. He stood, walked to a cabinet, and returned with a thick ledger. He set it in front of her. Tell me what's wrong. Lenora looked at him. With what? That. You want me to examine your ranch ledger? Yes. Now? Yes. You haven't hired me. No. She wiped her fingers carefully. Then she opened the book. The first pages contained cattle purchases, feed expenses, wages, repairs, transportation costs, seed, tools, and bank payments. The handwriting changed frequently. Lenora read for several minutes. Adrian waited. She turned another page, then another. Who keeps this? Usually me. Usually? My foreman enters expenses when I'm away. Name? Silas Boone. Lenora ran one finger down a column. Your hay costs increased 17% between October and December. Winter. Quantity didn't increase. Adrian leaned forward. Lenora turned another page. Salt blocks increased too. 12%. Same supplier. Mostly. Freight charges? Included. Then either the merchant raised his prices without telling you, or somebody recorded the wrong amount. Adrian said nothing. Lenora kept reading. These 3 invoices are entered twice. He looked down. They are. Yes. She pointed. March 2nd. $48. March 10th. Same invoice number. March 18th. Different date but identical amount and description. Adrian stared. Could be mistakes. Certainly. Anything else? Lenora turned several more pages. Your cash withdrawals don't match your listed purchases. His expression hardened. How far off? Not enough to notice if you're busy. How far? Maybe $200 since November. Adrian sat back. You're sure? No. He frowned. She continued. I'm sure there is a discrepancy. I'm not sure of the amount until I check every entry. How long? A few hours. You tired? Very. You still want work? Yes. He closed the ledger. Try 1 month. Lenora blinked. Excuse me? 1 month. Room, meals, $25. 25. You think it's low. I think it's more than anyone else offered. Nobody else offered anything. Exactly. He stood. I need cooking, household work, supply management, and accounts. You won't be expected to handle livestock unless you choose to learn. Miriam comes 3 days a week, though she'll tell you she comes whenever she pleases. Who is Miriam? You'll find out tomorrow. Lenora stared at him. You're hiring me because I found 3 duplicate invoices. I'm hiring you because you walked 4 miles uphill after the town turned you away. Her throat tightened. Adrian picked up his coffee. People who give up don't usually do that. Lenora looked down at the ledger. I stop. He waited. I just don't always stay stopped. Good. That night Lenora slept in a small bedroom at the back of the house. The mattress sagged. The curtains smelled faintly of dust. The window rattled whenever the wind crossed the ridge. It was the finest room she had seen in months. She lay beneath a heavy quilt, staring into darkness. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she cried. Quietly. Not because Adrian had hurt her, because he hadn't. Sometimes kindness reached places cruelty had bruised so long ago that a person forgot they were still sore. The next morning, Lenora met Miriam Dace. Miriam arrived before sunrise carrying eggs, a basket of herbs, and enough authority for 3 people. She was 63, small enough that Lenora could almost have hidden her behind one shoulder, with silver-streaked hair twisted into a tight knot. Her face looked stern until she smiled, which she did, rarely but sincerely. She entered the kitchen, saw Lenora kneading bread, and stopped. You the new one? I believe so. Miriam looked her up and down. Lenora continued kneading. Go ahead, she said. Go ahead what? Ask. Miriam set down the basket. How much yeast did you use? Lenora looked up. That's your question? What else would I ask? Lenora almost laughed. 1 spoon. Miriam inspected the dough. Too much. It is not. It'll rise out of the bowl. It won't. Miriam narrowed her eyes. Lenora narrowed hers back. 2 hours later, they stood over a perfect loaf. Miriam tore off a piece. Chewed. Lenora waited. Don't look pleased. I'm not. You are. I am a little. Miriam ate another piece. Adrian said you know books. I do. He doesn't. I noticed. He'll hate hearing that. He already knows. Miriam glanced toward the yard, where Adrian was saddling a horse. Maybe that's why he hired you. The first weeks passed quietly. Lenora discovered that ranch life was difficult, but difficulty was different from impossibility. She woke before dawn. She cooked breakfast. She cleaned. She reorganized food storage. She moved the flour away from the stove, labeled jars, counted tools, repaired the pantry shelves, and created a supply book so they could track what disappeared and when. She rested when she needed to. At first, she hated resting where Adrian might see. One afternoon, he entered the kitchen and found her sitting with her feet raised on a low stool. Lenora immediately stood. Don't, she looked at him. Don't what? Stand because I came in. I'm working. You've been working since 5. I'm fine. Your ankles are swollen. She froze. Embarrassment moved through her like heat. Adrian seemed to realize how the comment sounded. I wasn't criticizing. I know what swollen ankles look like. So do I. I don't need to be watched. I'm not watching you. You noticed. I noticed things on my ranch. Lenora looked away. He leaned against the doorway. You don't have to prove you're useful every minute you're awake. Something in her face must have changed. Adrian's voice softened. I hired you. For 1 month. You're halfway through. I know. You think I'm counting the days, aren't you? No. Lenora folded the cloth in her lap. I am. Adrian considered that. Why? Because the last day matters more, when you've spent years being temporary. He did not answer immediately. Then he nodded. I know something about that. And he walked outside. It was one of the first moments Lenora wondered what had happened to him. She did not ask. The ranch slowly changed around her. There was fresh bread every morning. The floors no longer held mud from 3 winters. Adrian's receipts were sorted. Invoices were tied by month. Expenses were entered clearly. The ranch hands who came in from distant grazing camps learned that Lenora could remember who preferred coffee strong, who hated onions, whose wife had just had a baby, and who had borrowed money against wages 6 months earlier. Some liked her, some did not. One young worker named Ezra Pike treated her with immediate kindness. Another, Wade Mercer, barely spoke to her. Silas Boone, Adrian's foreman, smiled too often. Silas was perhaps 45, with pale eyes and a mustache that curved around his mouth. He had worked for Adrian for 7 years and carried himself like a man confident of his position. When Lenora first asked him about certain supply entries, his smile never moved. Books get messy. These are unusually messy. You accusing me of something? No. Sounds like it? If I were accusing you, Mr. Boone, you would know. He laughed. I see why Kells likes having you around. Lenora stared. And what is that supposed to mean? Nothing. It sounded like something. Silas leaned against the desk. Towns talking. I've lived through towns talking before. They're saying lonely man, lonely woman, big, empty house. Lenora closed the ledger. Do you have information about the invoices? No. Then I'm busy. His smile faded slightly. Careful, Mrs. Voss. About what? Making trouble where there isn't any. Lenora met his eyes. I've found that trouble rarely needs my help. Silas left. That evening, Lenora barely ate. Adrian noticed. She wished he hadn't. Food bad? No. You cooked it. I am aware. You sick? No. He continued eating. Lenora pushed potatoes around her plate. Finally, Adrian set down his fork. What did somebody say? She looked up sharply. Why do you assume somebody said something? Because you looked like this after the last trip to town. I looked like what? Like you're trying very hard not to look hurt. Lenora's face warmed. That is a remarkably personal observation. Wasn't meant to be. Then perhaps you should observe less. Maybe. They ate in silence. Then Lenora whispered, They're talking about us. Adrian shrugged. They talk about weather too. They're not saying the weather is sleeping with you. His fork stopped. Lenora immediately regretted the bluntness. Adrian looked toward the window. Silas? She did not answer. That was answer enough. I'll speak to him. No. Why? Because then everyone will believe I ran to you. You did tell me. After you questioned me until I did. I asked 3 things. That was enough. Adrian studied her. I don't care what Bellweather says. I know. Then why do you? The question was not cruel. That made it harder. Lenora looked down at her hands. Because you have lived far enough away from people that you have forgotten what constant judgment feels like. Adrian's eyes darkened slightly. You think so? I think you chose loneliness. He stood. The chair scraped the floor. Lenora realized she had struck something hidden. Adrian carried his plate to the basin. No, he said quietly. I didn't. Then he left. Miriam told her the story 2 days later. Not all of it, only enough. Adrian had once been married. His wife Clara had died during childbirth. The child had died too. 2 years later, Adrian's younger brother Daniel was killed in a logging accident. Within less than 3 years, Adrian lost nearly everyone he loved. He didn't choose being alone, Miriam said while slicing apples. He just got afraid of wanting people to stay. Lenora looked toward the window. Adrian stood near the barn speaking to Ezra. I shouldn't have said what I said. No. I apologized. Good. He said it didn't matter. Miriam snorted. Means it mattered. Lenora smiled sadly. He's difficult. So are you. Thank you. You're welcome. By early June, Lenora's 1-month arrangement had quietly become permanent. There had been no formal conversation. Adrian simply handed her wages at the end of the month. Another month? She asked. If you want. She did. Then another month passed. And another. Something else changed too. Lenora began finding irregularities that were harder to explain. The duplicate invoices continued, but only in older records now. A cattle sale from the previous year showed 37 animals sold, while transportation documents listed 34. A payment to a surveyor appeared 3 times under slightly different descriptions. Several receipts from Mason Supply had signatures Lenora did not recognize. Then she discovered something stranger. A map. It was folded inside a folder marked Fence Repairs. Lenora spread it over Adrian's desk. The map showed the northern edge of the ranch, where the land climbed toward a rocky basin known locally as Ghost Hollow. A blue line had been drawn through the basin. Beside it, in handwriting that was not Adrian's, someone had written, "Spring source. Estimated flow unusually high." Lenora stared. She had heard ranch workers mention the spring. It never froze completely. Even during dry years, water continued flowing from the mountain. In cattle country, reliable water could be worth more than the surrounding land. She heard footsteps. Silas entered. His face changed when he saw the map. Only for a second. But Lenora noticed. "Where'd you get that?" "In the fence folder." "That's old." "Whose handwriting?" "Don't know." "You looked very interested for someone who doesn't know." Silas crossed the room and reached for the map. Lenora placed her hand over it. "I haven't finished." "That isn't your business." "Everything affecting ranch accounts is my business." "Adrian tell you that?" "Yes." It was not entirely true. Silas looked toward the door, then lowered his voice. "You are getting too comfortable here." Lenora's heartbeat quickened. "Meaning?" "Meaning Kells gave you a kitchen and a desk." "That doesn't make this your ranch." "I never said it did." "Then remember." He took the map. Lenora watched him fold it. "Why are you frightened of a piece of paper, Mr. Boone?" Silas stopped. He smiled, but his eyes didn't. "You have a strange imagination." "And you didn't answer." He tucked the map under his arm. "Ask fewer questions." Then he left. Lenora sat very still. For the first time since arriving at Kells Ranch, she felt afraid. Not the familiar fear of humiliation. Something quieter, colder. The fear that she had stepped into a room without realizing someone else was already hiding inside. That night she told Adrian. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he stared into his coffee. "You knew about the spring survey?" "No." "The map was detailed." "Who commissioned it?" "There was no name." "Silas took it?" "Yes." Adrian stood. Lenora caught his sleeve. "Don't confront him tonight." He looked down at her hand. She released him. "Why not?" "Because if there's an innocent explanation, waiting costs nothing. If there isn't, telling him we are suspicious gives him time to hide whatever else exists." Adrian slowly sat again. "You've done this before." "Not this." "You sound like you have." "My husband's partner stole from the freight business." Adrian's expression softened. "You caught him?" "Too late." "How?" "By asking questions after everyone told me grief had made me confused." She looked toward the lamp. "I believed them for several months. That was expensive." Adrian remained quiet. Lenora continued. "I learned something. When money disappears slowly, the thief usually counts on embarrassment. People are ashamed they didn't notice, so they keep quiet." "What do you think Silas is doing?" "I don't know yet." "Then what?" "We find out." For the next 2 weeks, Lenora worked carefully. She said nothing to Silas. She copied suspicious figures into a private notebook. She compared cattle tallies with sales receipts. She checked property tax records in Bellweather. She asked ordinary questions that sounded unrelated. Which roads flooded? Who had surveyed Ghost Hollow? Who owned land north of Adrian? One name kept appearing. Tobin Say. Tobin was wealthy. Not Bellweather wealthy. State wealthy. He owned timberland, mining claims, grazing rights, and several businesses stretching across 3 counties. He rarely visited Bellweather, but when he did, people noticed. Corinne Vale knew him well. Her father had once done business with him. Morris Tate rented pasture from one of his companies. The town bank had received a large deposit from a Say-owned firm just 6 months earlier. Lenora also learned that Tobin had recently purchased 3 parcels surrounding the northern boundary of Kells Ranch. Only Adrian's land stood between those properties and the road leading south. One afternoon, Adrian found Lenora staring at the map she had recreated from memory. "You didn't tell me Saye bought the north parcels." "I didn't know." How do you not know who owns land beside yours? I know cattle. Apparently you should also know speculators. Adrian leaned over the desk. What's this? The spring, she pointed. If Tobin controls all the surrounding land but not your water, his property is worth less. Adrian frowned. He has streams, seasonal, and according to county records, 2 dried almost completely last summer. Adrian's expression changed. Lenora tapped the page. Your spring didn't. No. Has it ever? Not in my lifetime. Then this may not be about cattle. What else? Future development, timber camps, mining, land sales. Anything requiring guaranteed water. Adrian slowly sat. You think Silas is working for him? I think Silas is afraid of questions. That's not proof. No. Good. Lenora looked at him. You're defending him. He worked beside my brother. That explained more than Adrian intended. Daniel? Adrian nodded. Silas was there the day Daniel died. He brought him home. Lenora's anger softened. Adrian? He stayed when everybody else left. I understand. No, you don't. His voice sharpened. Then he stopped. Lenora waited. Adrian rubbed his jaw. I trust him. I know. And you think he's stealing? I think something is wrong. Same thing. No. She closed her notebook. Adrian, I am not asking you to condemn your friend because numbers look strange. I am asking you to let the numbers speak before loyalty speaks for them. He looked at her for a long time. Fine. But the words sounded painful. Summer deepened. The slopes turned green. Wildflowers appeared along the fences. Cattle moved higher into the mountain pasture, and evenings stretched long and gold over the valley. Lenora began walking after supper. At first, she only went to the barn, then the corral, then the ridge beyond the house. She walked slowly, using a sturdy stick Adrian made for her. The first time he handed it to her, she frowned. A walking stick. You keep grabbing fences. I do not. You do. Only steep places. Mountain is mostly steep places. She took the stick. Did you make this? No. She examined the fresh knife marks. You are a poor liar. Been told. She smiled. Thank you. He looked away almost immediately. Those quiet moments became more frequent. Sometimes Adrian walked with her. They spoke about ordinary things. Cattle, weather, food. Miriam's habit of hiding sugar in 3 different cabinets because she believed ranch workers used too much. Once they sat on a fallen tree, watching sunset turn the mountains orange. Lenora said, Walter liked sunsets. Adrian glanced at her. She rarely spoke about her husband. He used to say sunsets made people honest. How? He said no one can improve one. You just have to admit something beautiful happened without your help. Adrian considered that. Sounds irritating. He was often irritating. You loved him. Yes. The answer came easily. Do you still? Lenora looked toward the valley. In a way. Adrian nodded. She turned. Do you still love Clara? He was quiet so long she thought he would not answer. Yes. Lenora looked back at the mountains. Neither apologized. Neither seemed threatened. For the first time, Lenora understood that love for the dead did not always compete with affection for the living. Sometimes it simply made the heart more careful. The trouble began openly in August. Lenora rode into Bellweather with Miriam to collect supplies. She could ride now, though she preferred a broad, calm mare named Bluebell, and ignored anyone foolish enough to comment on the name. Corinne Vale stood outside the post office when they arrived. 2 women were with her. Lenora hoped to pass without conversation. Corinne stepped directly into her path. Mrs. Voss. Mrs. Vale. I hear you're still living at Kells Ranch. I work there, so people say. Miriam's face hardened. Lenora placed one hand lightly on her arm. Corinne continued. It's unusual. Employment, your arrangement. You seem remarkably interested in it. This is a small community. That doesn't require a small imagination. One of the women beside Corinne covered a smile. Corinne's cheeks colored. I only hope you understand how things appear. Lenora felt the familiar heat of shame, but something had changed since spring. She was tired of carrying other people's ugliness, as though it belonged to her. How do they appear? Corinne hesitated. Lenora waited. The street seemed quieter. Finally, Corinne said, "A lonely unmarried man keeps a widowed woman in his home." Lenora smiled faintly. "He also keeps 6 chickens near the kitchen. Shall we discuss those?" Miriam made a choking sound that might have been laughter. Corinne stiffened. "You make jokes because you know exactly what people think." "No." Lenora's voice softened. "I make jokes because I spent too many years believing I had to defend myself every time somebody decided my body gave them permission to insult me." Corinne stared. Lenora continued. "If you want to know whether Adrian Kells and I have behaved improperly, ask directly." Corinne's confidence weakened. "Have you?" "No." Lenora stepped closer. "And if someday that answer changes, it still will not become your business." The silence that followed felt different from the silence months earlier. Then people had watched her humiliation. Now they watched Corinne's. Lenora did not enjoy it as much as she expected. She simply walked into the store. That evening, however, Adrian found her standing outside after dark. She was crying, quietly. Her back was toward the house. He stopped several feet away. "Lenora." She wiped her face immediately. "I'm fine." "No, you're not. I am tired." "That town again?" She laughed once, bitterly. "It shouldn't matter, but it does. I stood there today and answered her. I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. Everyone saw that she was being cruel. Good. Then why did I come home and cry?" Adrian did not answer. Lenora wrapped her arms around herself. "I hate that they can still reach me." He moved closer. "People who know where you've been hurt don't need much strength to touch the bruise." She looked at him. "That's almost wise. Don't tell Miriam." A small laugh escaped her through tears. Adrian stood beside her. He did not touch her. That somehow made the moment more intimate. After a while, Lenora whispered, "Sometimes I wonder what it would feel like to enter a room and not wonder who is measuring me." Adrian looked toward the dark mountains. "I measure you." She stiffened. He continued, "How many numbers you find wrong?" Lenora stared. "How much coffee you steal?" "I do not steal coffee." "How many biscuits disappear before breakfast?" "You eat most of them." "Probably." Her mouth trembled toward a smile. Adrian finally looked at her. "And how quiet the house gets when you're in town." The smile vanished. Neither moved. Lenora's heartbeat seemed suddenly too loud. Adrian looked almost frightened. He stepped back. "Good night, Lenora." "Good night." She watched him go inside. The next morning, everything between them appeared normal, which made it obvious that nothing was normal at all. 2 days later, Silas disappeared. Not permanently, only for one evening, but he lied about where he had been. Ezra mentioned seeing him near the North Road speaking with a man driving a polished black carriage. Silas claimed he had been repairing fence near Willow Creek. Lenora checked the work schedule. No repairs had been planned there, she told Adrian. This time he did not defend Silas. He looked tired. "I'll ask him." "Not yet." "Lenora, we need proof." "How much proof?" "Enough that he can't explain it away." Adrian's jaw tightened. "This feels like spying. It is investigating. Same difference." "It won't feel the same if you accuse an innocent man." He hated that she was right. The proof came from an unlikely place. Miriam. She entered Lenora's room one evening holding a crumpled paper. "Found this in Silas's shirt pocket." Lenora stared. "You searched his clothes." "I washed his clothes." "That sounds less criminal." "I have no objection to criminal if necessary." Lenora unfolded the paper. It contained a date, a dollar amount, and initials. T.S. $500. Below that were the words, "Northern filing complete." Lenora's stomach tightened. "Where is Silas?" "Barn. Does he know you found it?" "No." Lenora carried the note to Adrian. He read it twice, then sat down. $500 is almost 3 months of his wages. Yes. Could be anything. Yes. You don't believe that? No. Adrian pressed both hands against the desk. Lenora watched the truth begin to enter him. Not fully. Not yet, but enough to hurt. "He stood beside me when we buried Daniel." "I know." He helped carry the coffin. I know. He stayed drunk beside the grave until morning, because he couldn't leave him there alone. Lenora sat across from him. People can love us and still betray us. Adrian looked up. That's supposed to make it better. No. Silas confessed 3 nights later. Not because Adrian accused him, because Lenora gave him a choice. She found him alone near the bunkhouse. $500, she said. Silas froze. His face went pale. Lenora held the note. Tell me what northern filing means. Silas looked toward the barn. You stole that. It was in laundry. Miriam, don't blame her. Silas stepped closer. What do you want? The truth. You wouldn't understand. Try. He looked suddenly older. The confidence drained out of him. Tobin Sai paid me. For what? Information. What information? Water flow, cattle numbers, debt, boundaries. Lenora's chest tightened. What filing? Silas said nothing. Silas. He rubbed both hands over his face. They're claiming part of Ghost Hollow. How? Old deed. Whose deed? Say says his grandfather bought water rights before Adrian's father purchased the ranch. Is it real? Silas looked at the ground. Lenora knew. You helped forge it. No. Did you? I didn't make the paper. But you helped. I gave them copies of Adrian's records. Lenora felt sick. Why? Silas's eyes filled with shame. My boy. Lenora paused. Silas rarely spoke about family. My son got into trouble in Denver. Gambling. Owed men money. I paid what I could. Say offered help. So you sold Adrian. I thought it was water rights. That's all. Water is the ranch. I know that now. You knew it then. Silas looked at her. I told myself different. Lenora understood more than she wanted to. People rarely woke up deciding to destroy someone they loved. Usually, they took one small wrong step and spent months inventing reasons not to admit where the road led. Will you testify? Silas's head snapped up. No. Then Say wins. He'll ruin me. You already helped ruin Adrian. Silas flinched. Lenora softened her voice. I am not asking you to be brave because you deserve forgiveness. Then why? Because telling the truth is the only useful thing left. Silas stared toward the mountains. I'm afraid. So am I. You? Constantly. He looked surprised. Lenora almost smiled. You think courage feels comfortable? Silas said nothing. The legal notice arrived the following morning. Tobin Say claimed historic rights to the Northern Spring and 30 acres surrounding it. The document included a copied deed dated 41 years earlier. If accepted, Adrian would lose control of the spring. Without it, large sections of summer pasture would become nearly useless. Adrian read the notice at the kitchen table. Then he walked outside. Lenora found him an hour later, sitting beside the corral. You knew? He asked. About the notice? No. Silas? Lenora hesitated. Adrian turned. You talked to him? Yes. When? Last night. And? She sat beside him. He confessed. Adrian closed his eyes. For several seconds, only cattle bells sounded from the hillside. How much? $500. Adrian laughed once. It was an empty sound. That's what 7 years costs. Don't what? Turn his failure into the value of your friendship. Adrian looked at her. They aren't the same thing. He sold me. He betrayed you. Difference? One says you were worth $500. The other says he was weak enough to take it. Adrian stared at the dirt. Lenora whispered, Don't make his weakness another reason to believe nobody stays. His face tightened. She had reached the wound. Adrian stood abruptly. I need air. We are outside. He almost smiled. Then he walked toward the ridge. The hearing was scheduled for October. Tobin expected a simple victory. His lawyers had papers. The county recorder had already accepted the disputed deed into preliminary records. Several influential townspeople supported him. Corinne Vale publicly insisted that Tobin was merely protecting property his family had owned for generations. Lenora did not argue publicly. She worked. For 6 weeks, she searched. She traveled to county archives. She examined tax books. She read old newspapers. She compared ink, signatures, boundary descriptions, water surveys, and property transfers. Adrian went with her whenever ranch work allowed. Their nights became long. Sometimes Lenora fell asleep at the desk. Adrian would place a blanket over her shoulders and continue reading. Sometimes he fell asleep first. Lenora would remove the pencil from his hand before it marked his face. Slowly, the case changed. The supposed old deed referred to a boundary marker called East Rail Post. Lenora searched historical surveys. There had been no East Rail Post 41 years earlier. The railroad did not reach that part of the valley until 9 years after the supposed deed was signed. That was the first crack. Then she found another. The signature of the county clerk who supposedly witnessed the transaction did not match his signatures from the same year. The handwriting was close, but not exact. Still, Tobin's lawyer could argue variation. Lenora needed more. One rainy afternoon, she sat alone in the county archive turning brittle pages. Her eyes ached. Her back hurt. She almost stopped. Then she noticed a name, Elias Wren, a surveyor, the same surveyor mentioned in Adrian's suspicious ranch account. She searched another box, then another. At closing time, the clerk told her she had 10 minutes. Lenora opened the last folder. Inside was a letter. It had been written 18 months earlier. Elias Wren requested payment from Tobin Say's land company for survey work at Ghost Hollow. Not 41 years earlier, 18 months. Lenora's hands began shaking. The survey used measurements nearly identical to those appearing in the supposedly ancient deed. She read it again, then again. "Ma'am," the clerk called. "We're closing." Lenora looked toward him. "I need a copy of this. Tomorrow." "No," he sighed. "Mrs. Voss, if this building burns tonight, I will haunt you for the rest of your life." The clerk stared. Lenora smiled politely. "Please." He made the copy. Silas finally agreed to testify after Lenora showed him the evidence. "You don't need me," he said. "We do. You proved the deed is false. I proved it is suspicious. Tobin has lawyers." "Exactly." Silas looked toward Adrian's ranch from the bunkhouse porch. "Kells won't forgive me." "Maybe not. You think I should do it anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because doing the right thing only when it earns forgiveness is another kind of bargain." Silas stared at her. "You always talk like this. Only when tired. Must be exhausted." "I am." He laughed for the first time in weeks. Then he agreed. The hearing drew nearly everyone in Bellweather. People who had mocked Lenora in spring arrived early for good seats. Corinne sat near the front in dark green. Morris Tate stood near the back. Miriam wore her best black dress and looked prepared to personally remove anyone who laughed. Adrian sat beside Lenora. His hand rested on his knee. Lenora noticed it trembling. She placed her hand over it. He looked at her. "I hate courtrooms," he whispered. "So do I." "You look calm." "I'm considering running away." "Good." "Why good?" "Means you're human." The judge entered. The hearing began. Tobin Say looked exactly as Lenora expected. Clean gray suit, silver hair, polished boots, a face practiced in appearing reasonable. His lawyer spoke first. He described inheritance, historic water rights, clerical confusion. He made the case sound boring. Boring could be powerful. People trusted documents when they were presented calmly. Then Lenora testified. Tobin's lawyer looked almost amused when she approached. "Mrs. Voss, what is your professional background?" "I kept financial records for a freight company for 11 years. "Are you an attorney?" "No." "A licensed surveyor?" "No." "County recorder?" "No." "Historian?" "No." "So you have no formal qualification to determine whether a historic deed is legitimate." Lenora looked at him. "I know how to read dates." A few people smiled. The lawyer did not. He held up the deed. "You claim this document is false." "I claim several facts inside it could not have existed when it was supposedly written." "Such as?" "The East Rail Post." He frowned. Lenora continued. "The deed describes a property line beginning 70 feet west of the East Rail Post. That marker was installed by the Bellweather Northern Railroad Survey Team in 1882. And the deed, 1873. The room shifted. The lawyer looked toward Tobin. Lenora placed copies of railroad records before the judge. 9 years before the post existed. The lawyer recovered. Names of landmarks are sometimes added to copied deeds for clarity. Correct. So that proves nothing. By itself, no. Lenora produced the survey letter. This does, she explained Elias Wren. The recent survey, the matching measurements, the suspicious payment in Adrian's accounts. Then Silas Boone entered. The room became completely still. Adrian did not look at him. Silas testified about Tobin's money, about the copied records, about the survey, about instructions to place certain papers where Adrian would not notice them, about the belief that Tobin intended to create enough confusion over historic ownership that Adrian would be forced into an expensive legal fight and eventually sell. Tobin's calm expression finally cracked. His lawyer objected repeatedly. The judge allowed most of the testimony. Then came the final piece. Lenora had found records showing that Tobin's company paid Elias Wren 3 days after the forged deed was submitted for copying. The amount matched the payment Silas remembered hearing discussed. The room was silent when Lenora finished. The judge looked over his glasses. "Mrs. Voss, why did you begin investigating these records?" Lenora glanced at Adrian, then at Silas, then toward the people from Bellweather. "Because small numbers were wrong." The judge waited. Lenora continued. "People think wrongdoing always announces itself. Usually it doesn't. Sometimes it looks like $4 more for feed, a duplicated invoice, a missing animal, a survey charge nobody remembers approving. Those things are easy to ignore." She looked toward Tobin, especially when the person noticing them is someone nobody expects to understand what she's seeing. Corinne lowered her eyes. Lenora saw it, and for once, she felt no triumph, only peace. The judge ruled that the disputed deed lacked credibility and ordered a formal investigation into its filing. Tobin's claim was dismissed. His attorneys requested review. The judge denied immediate control of the spring. The ranch was safe. For the first few seconds, Adrian did not move. Then he turned toward Lenora. "You did it." She shook her head. "We did." "No." His voice broke slightly. "You did." People were watching. Lenora expected him to become uncomfortable. Instead, Adrian reached for her hand. He held it openly. Miriam began crying, then pretended she was coughing. Outside the courthouse, a crowd formed. Some people congratulated Adrian, others congratulated Lenora. Morris Tate approached awkwardly. He removed his hat. "Mrs. Voss, Mr. Tate." He cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology." Lenora waited. He looked miserable. "I laughed that day. Yes, it was wrong. Yes, I didn't think you'd make it. I know." He glanced toward Adrian. "Turns out Kells saw something the rest of us didn't." Lenora considered the words, then shook her head. "No." Morris looked confused. "He didn't see something magical," she said. "He listened when I told him what I could do." Morris slowly nodded. "Fair enough." Corinne came last. She stood several feet away. For once, there was no audience gathered around her. "I suppose you're pleased," she said. Lenora was tired, too tired for another fight. "About the ranch? Yes. About humiliating Tobin? No." Corinne looked surprised. "He tried to steal from you. From Adrian." "Same thing now, isn't it?" Lenora's heart skipped. Corinne noticed. A small, knowing sadness appeared in her face. Then she looked away. "I was cruel to you." Lenora said nothing. Corinne swallowed. "I don't know why. I think you do." Corinne's eyes returned to hers. Lenora spoke gently. "You decided there had to be a reason you were better than me." Corinne flinched. Lenora continued. "Maybe because, if worth isn't based on appearance or money, or who people respect, then it becomes harder to know where anyone stands." Corinne's eyes filled slightly. Lenora had not expected tears. "Are you forgiving me?" "No." Corinne almost laughed. Lenora smiled. "But I am finished carrying you." She walked away. Winter arrived early that year. The first snow fell in November, soft and quiet over the ranch. Silas left Bellweather after giving full testimony to investigators. Before leaving, he came to see Adrian. Lenora remained in the kitchen while they spoke outside. She did not know everything said between them. She saw Adrian shake Silas's hand at the end, not embrace him, not forgive everything, but neither did he turn away. Sometimes healing was less dramatic than people imagined. Sometimes it looked like two men standing beside a fence in cold weather, admitting that something had broken, and neither knew whether it could ever be repaired. The ranch settled into winter. Miriam came less often because snow made the road difficult. Lenora's room became warmer after Adrian repaired the window. The cattle moved into lower pasture. Evenings became long. One night, Lenora sat beside the kitchen stove, sewing a tear in Adrian's coat. He entered carrying firewood. "You know I can mend that. I've seen your mending. It holds. So does rope around a gate. That doesn't mean it belongs on a sleeve." He stacked the wood. Lenora threaded the needle again. Adrian did not leave. She looked up. "What?" "Nothing. You are staring. Thinking. That is often dangerous." He sat across from her. Lenora waited. Adrian rubbed his palms together, then laughed nervously. She had never seen him nervous. That frightened her more than anger would have. "What happened?" "Nothing. Is a cow missing?" "No." "Roof leaking?" "No." "Miriam coming to live with us?" "God, no." "Then why do you look like you're about to confess to murder?" Adrian smiled. "Can I ask something?" "Yes." "Why are you still here?" Lenora blinked. "Excuse me. You could leave now." "Why would I?" "You've got money saved. Half the town would hire you. Half the town had its chance." "I know." "Then why ask?" Adrian looked toward the fire. "Because I need to know whether you're here because you need the job." Lenora slowly placed the coat in her lap. "And if I am?" "That's fine." "You don't sound fine." "I'm trying." "Trying what?" He looked at her. For years, Lenora had become skilled at reading the moment before rejection. A man's discomfort, a woman's pity, the little pause when kindness prepared to become embarrassment. She saw none of that in Adrian. What she saw was fear, pure and simple, the same fear she carried. "I don't want you to leave," he said. Lenora's throat tightened. "You could simply continue employing me." "Not what I mean." Silence filled the kitchen. Snow tapped gently against the window. Adrian leaned forward. "I'm bad at this." "I've noticed. Helpful. Sorry." "No, you're not. No." He smiled briefly. Then his face became serious again. "When Clara died, I decided wanting people was dangerous." Lenora said nothing. "When Daniel died, I decided I had been right." His eyes lowered. "So I stopped asking anybody to stay." Lenora felt tears beginning already. She hated how easily he could do that to her now. Adrian continued. "Then you climbed up that road carrying that ridiculous case. It is a perfectly respectable case. The handle is string. It remains functional. You argued with me before you even ate. You were irritating. You reorganized my kitchen. It was terrible. You found money missing. Also terrible. You kept talking. Someone had to. You filled every empty room in this house without trying." Lenora could no longer look at him. She whispered, "Adrian, I don't know when it happened." He moved closer. "I know when I noticed." She looked up. "When?" "The day you went to Bellweather and didn't come back before dark. I was buying flour. I thought something happened. You knew where I was. Didn't matter." His voice grew quiet. House felt wrong. Lenora's eyes filled. Adrian looked directly at her. "I don't want you smaller." She froze. He continued carefully. "I don't want you quieter. I don't want you easier for other people to look at. I don't care what Corinne thinks. I don't care what anybody thinks." A tear rolled down Lenora's cheek. A tear rolled down Lenora's cheek. She wiped it. Adrian stood. "So I guess what I'm trying to say badly is that I want you here. As your bookkeeper, no. Cook? No. Housekeeper? No." Lenora's voice trembled. "Then what?" Adrian swallowed. "Lenora." He took her hand. "As the woman I love." For a moment, she could not breathe. She had imagined words like those before, years ago. Then she had stopped. Not because she believed herself impossible to love. That would have been easier. She stopped because hoping became exhausting. Lenora pulled her hand away. Adrian's face fell. She stood. "I need a moment." "All right." She crossed the kitchen. Her hands shook. Adrian remained where he was. Lenora turned toward him. "You cannot say that, because I saved your ranch." "I don't. Because you're grateful." "I'm grateful. That isn't love." "I know. Because you're lonely." "I am lonely." Her face crumpled. "Then how do I know?" Adrian approached slowly. "You don't." Lenora stared. He stopped in front of her. "You can't know tonight." His voice was gentle. "You know what I say. You know how I treat you tomorrow. Then, the day after. Then after that." Lenora began crying harder. She hated it. She covered her face. "Wonderful." "What?" "I told myself if someone ever said something like this, I would be graceful." Adrian smiled. "Why start now?" She laughed through tears. He reached up, then stopped before touching her cheek. Lenora noticed. "Why did you stop?" "Didn't know if you wanted me to." She lowered her hands. That small question broke whatever remained of her defenses. She stepped forward. Adrian wrapped his arms around her. Lenora stiffened for half a second. Then she collapsed against him. Not physically. Something older. Something exhausted. Years of standing straight while people laughed. Years of pretending rejection was ordinary. Years of convincing herself she needed less tenderness than everyone else. She cried against his shirt. Adrian held her. He did not hush her. Did not tell her she was fine. Did not say there was no reason to cry. He simply stayed. Eventually, Lenora whispered, "This is embarrassing." "No, my nose is running." "A little." She pulled back. "You could have lied." "I'm bad at it." She wiped her face. Adrian smiled. Lenora stared at him. "You truly don't want me to change." He frowned. "Change what?" She gestured toward herself. "This." He understood. His expression became almost offended. "Lenora, I need you to answer."
I love you.
"That isn't the question."
Yes, it is.
Her eyes filled again. Adrian took both her hands.
You think I haven't watched you walk into town knowing people might laugh and go anyway?
She looked down.
You think I haven't seen you climb this mountain when your knees hurt?
She tried to pull her hands away. He held them gently. "You think I don't notice when you rest, because you're tired, and then apologize like tiredness is a crime." Lenora's face tightened. "You think I love you despite your body." She looked at him. "I love you in it." Silence. "You are the woman standing in front of me." "All of you," Lenora whispered. "People always say health when they mean appearance. Then let doctors talk about health if you ask them. I'm talking about whether I want you. And? I thought I made that part obvious." She laughed. Adrian smiled. Then Lenora began crying again. "Stop making me cry. I'm not doing anything." "Exactly." He pulled her close once more. Outside, snow continued falling. By morning, the ranch was covered in white. Months later, when spring returned to Bellweather, people became accustomed to seeing Lenora beside Adrian. Some still whispered. People always would. Lenora discovered something strange. Whispers sounded much quieter when she stopped bending toward them. She continued keeping ranch accounts. She expanded the cattle records. She negotiated better supply contracts. She convinced Adrian to repair the North Irrigation Channel. She hired Ezra to help supervise inventory. Miriam continued criticizing her bread, even while eating 3 slices. The legal investigation into Tobin Say moved slowly, but his influence weakened. Several other landowners came forward with similar complaints. The man who had seemed untouchable became merely a man answering questions he had once believed nobody would dare ask. Silas wrote Adrian twice. The first letter went unanswered. The second received 3 sentences. It was not forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. One afternoon, Lenora rode into Bellweather alone. She tied Bluebell outside Avery's general store. The same bell jingled above the door. The same stove stood near the back. The same clerk worked behind the counter. Morris Tate was there. So was one of the men who had laughed that first day. Conversation paused when Lenora entered, then started again. Nobody laughed. Lenora walked to the counter. "Morning, Mrs. Voss." "Morning." "Usual order? Flour, coffee, lamp oil, salt, and 2 boxes of nails." The clerk began gathering supplies. Lenora looked toward the stove. For one strange second, she could see herself standing there months earlier, tired, hungry, desperate, trying to remain dignified while strangers discussed whether a body like hers could possibly contain anything useful. She remembered the abandoned shed, the tears, the terrible thought that perhaps everyone else knew something about her value that she did not. She wished she could walk backward through time, not to punish anyone, not even to stop the laughter. She wanted to find that woman sitting alone on the crate. She wanted to kneel beside her. She wanted to say, "They are wrong," not, "You will become thin," not, "You will become beautiful enough for them," not, "You will make them regret everything." Not only, "They are wrong. Your life is not finished because strangers failed to imagine your future." The clerk placed the supplies on the counter. "Anything else?" Lenora returned to the present. "Apple sugar," he smiled. "Making preserves. Adrian likes them. Thought you said they were important." "They are." She paid. As she lifted the first sack, the man near the stove stood. "I'll carry that." Lenora looked at him. It was the same man who had joked about a horse carrying her up the mountain. He remembered too. She could see it. "You don't have to," she said. "I know." That answer sounded familiar. Lenora smiled. "All right." He carried the sack outside. Not everything required revenge. Sometimes the most satisfying answer to cruelty was living long enough to become impossible for it to define. That evening, Adrian found Lenora sitting on the porch, watching the mountains turn purple. He lowered himself beside her. "You look thoughtful. Dangerous, I know. Very." She leaned against his shoulder. Adrian took her hand. For several minutes neither spoke. Then Lenora said, "Do you know what I thought the first day I came here? That I was handsome? No. Shame. I thought you would reject me. I almost did." She sat upright. "What?" Adrian laughed. "Not because of you." "Then why?" "I didn't want anybody in the house." Lenora stared. "You let me spend months believing my excellent qualifications impressed you." "They did. But you almost sent me away. Then you opened the ledger. And?" "You looked at it for 5 minutes and found mistakes I'd stared at for a year." Lenora smiled. "So intelligence saved me." "No. What did?" Adrian looked at her. "You asked for work instead of pity." Her smile faded. "I remember. And I understood that." "Why?" "Because I didn't want pity either." Lenora rested her head against his shoulder again. The sun disappeared behind the mountain. Lights began appearing far below in Bellweather. Adrian whispered, "Stay." Lenora smiled. "You ask me that every few weeks. I like the answer. You know the answer. Say it anyway." She looked toward the house. Their house now. There were fresh curtains in the windows. Miriam had planted herbs beside the kitchen. Adrian's coat hung near the door where Lenora had repaired it. Her old leather case sat in the bedroom closet. She had never replaced the string around the handle. She kept it that way deliberately. Not because she remained poor, because sometimes a repaired thing deserved to keep the mark of how hard it had worked to survive. Lenora looked at Adrian. "I'll stay." His fingers tightened around hers. Years earlier, Lenora had believed belonging meant finding a place where nobody could hurt her. She knew better now. People would still judge. Some would still whisper. There would be difficult days, tired days, and moments when old wounds suddenly ached because somebody accidentally touched them. Belonging was not a world without pain. It was having somewhere safe to bring the pain home. It was a kitchen where she could cry without hiding, a porch where silence did not mean rejection, a man who did not love a future version of her, a friend who criticized her yeast, work that mattered, a name written into ranch books in her own steady hand. It was waking each morning knowing her value did not depend on whether the town remembered it. The woman Bellweather once called useless had not become worthy. She had always been worthy. The only thing that changed was that she finally stopped asking people who could not see her to decide whether she deserved to take up space. And on a quiet mountain ranch where pine trees whispered in the evening wind and water ran cold and clear from the spring she had helped save, Lenora Voss finally allowed herself to live as though that truth had been hers all along.